We see people getting angry, almost looking for a fight. We experience trauma, we react. Hey everyone, welcome. It's me, Rosalie Elliott, and I'm excited to embark on this special journey with you where we dive deeper into psychology and encouragement. I don't know about you, but I have experienced trauma in my life. I may not have PTSD as a combat veteran or as a soldier or as someone who served in the military. But as you may or may not know, trauma and PTSD doesn't just come from those things. It does not just come from having served in the military and having seen war. Over the course of time, humanity has discovered that trauma and PTSD can also be the result of abuse and different traumatic events in people's lives. Over the course of time, what we've learned about trauma is that it goes beyond, as mentioned, those who have gone to war or seen the most horrific of what humanity is capable of, but even trauma in our day to day life. And they are discovering more and more now how it even affects DNA and the body and the mind. So, where in the past, mental illness was looked at as mental illness, something in the mind, something we can't see, perhaps something that's not even quite as real as physical ailment. They are now learning that it is very much real. And thankfully, stigmas are somewhat decreasing in certain areas, but it's tricky because in many places it is still considered different than an actual broken bone or a physical disease or illness. And we're learning that it's not separate. We're holistic beings. That's what I've learned in my training. We are not just body and mind two separately. There's no way to clean cut where one begins and the other ends. What happens in our body affects our mind, it affects our psyche, it affects our spirit or soul. What happens in our spirit and our minds and emotions affects our bodies. Trauma that happens that may be mental turmoil can affect our bodies, our health. That's why they say stress, for example, reduces your immune system or weakens it. A lot of my memories, even from my childhood and teenage years, are not a flowing narrative. They're pieces put together. And I've learned that our brains do that sometimes in the face of trauma and distress, that our minds block some of those memories. And sometimes it comes up through therapy. Sometimes it comes up in an instant through a smell, something you see or perceive through your senses. But a lot of times we block what causes us distress. It's kind of like a self-preserving mechanism that our mind reverts to. I know that many people on our channel also are veterans. Many of you have come by through songs that I've reacted to that pertain to patriotism or America or the service or veterans. And I know there's several that I can relate to this, that have served or that have seen some type of trauma. There's many people from in some shape or form that have experienced trauma. A lot of people that are hurting that have spoken up when I reacted to songs by NF, who's spoken on his experience with abuse or his mom's death. People who've come, as I mentioned, for the videos about veterans and such. And I think this is so relatable because of that. And I think on the surface level, many of us know this, right? People who experience trauma and the horrors that have been done to them or the horrors that then they do in response leads to numbing, right? Through substance abuse, through alcoholism and drugs, where people try to self-medicate or look for distractions to numb the pain, is also accurate on a smaller scale with what people do on their day-to-day. We experience trauma. We react in the sense of being reactive in the comment section or the way we engage when we have road rage or when we go to the store. Not that everyone is having trauma and their behavior should be excused. We still have a responsibility how we react and what we do in return. But it's just this cycle that I'm referring to where people are hurt, something traumatic or discomforting happens to them and they react, they lash out on somebody else who doesn't deserve it at all. And of course, there's a whole topic we could go into here when it comes to these soldiers who have PTSD, right? Some would say, well, they shouldn't have gone to begin with. They shouldn't have started it. This country started it. This nation started it. Then we could go on to talk about the corruption of the politics and how they use soldiers and irregular people as pawns, people who mean well, who want to fight for their country, who have an honorable sense of patriotism are now pawns in a bigger money game. There's so many things we could talk about here. But I think point is that people are hurting. At the end of the day, the point is that people have suffered and are causing more suffering, and they find themselves in this perpetual cycle where they're stuck, they're numb, and they're stuck in that trauma, right? It's almost like they can't break out. And sometimes there's a level of comfort in that. Sometimes we tend to be drawn back to the toxic because that's all we know, and it gives us a sense of comfort, but we can speak more on that later. What happened over the years with scientists trying to understand PTSD and trauma and medication coming on the map, and trying to help people, the different things that were done. It was quite interesting to read even the history, where we see that there was a time where things that are now we now know are horrendous were even dismissed. I mean, even when it comes to abuse and molestation of young girls, of women, where there was a time where that was not deemed as damaging as we now know it to be. I mean, just it's really crazy to see the evolution of medicine and of psychiatry, psychology. And, it's interesting because we live in a time now where thankfully stigmas are being removed. Thankfully, mental health, mental illness, and the way that it affects even our DNA and our bodies is being addressed. But then at the same time, I feel like if we're not careful, we're swinging to another extreme where it's no longer being addressed. It's romanticized. And what I mean by that is there are, you see through social media this trend that things can go viral that are shocking because they evoke emotion in us. We want to see the things that are super heartwarming, super crazy, super scary, right? We want the extreme. And it's like a drug. Social media happens to have this effect very similar to drugs. It releases these dopamines, it makes us feel good. And I recently saw a diagram, a study when it comes to neuroscience, the way our brain operates, where when we expect an reward, the curve rises and drops faster. We're expecting an award. We know something's going to happen, so we experience that high, and then it drops, and we're left feeling empty. I suppose holidays could be compared to that. Christmas, right? We're excited. We know something's going to be awesome and exciting, or we hope. It comes and it goes. And now here comes January. New Year's is over, and we're feeling alone and depressed because it's cold and gloomy in certain parts of the world. And we don't know what to do with ourselves. Our New Year's resolutions are failing. We feel alone. And we're coming back to the harsh reality that life is not as wonderful as it seemed in the glimmer of the Christmas lights. And that might not be everybody's story, but I think it applies to some. And so when you expect a reward, that curve rises and drops faster of that dopamine release, and you find yourself disappointed because what you expected happens, it's over, what now? But in comparison, when we are looking at rewards that we did not expect, where we didn't know what to expect, that dopamine peak kicks in later on, right? So you have that curve and then it peaks and fades out. And that, I guess, would be preferable to many people because you didn't expect it. So you get to cherish, you get to enjoy that fix longer. You didn't see it coming. And that is often the case with social media. You don't know how many people are liking your video. You don't know who's commenting. So you go to check. Now you see someone commented, loved your stuff. So and so many people criticized or loved it and liked it, and you're getting that release, the dopamine fix. And these happy feeling chemicals are released in your mind, making you feel good about yourself, seen, wanted. Maybe it's a kick of adrenaline, maybe other chemicals that kick in when it pertains to stress. If someone's criticizing you or there's a fight or a debate going on, different chemicals, different emotions, but there is some type of reward, some type of response you're receiving. And our minds enjoy these chemicals, enjoy these fixes, so we go back for more. And that cycle perpetuates. And so in the same way, just as much as that is addictive, you find that when it comes to suffering, when it comes to trauma, we find those things being habit building, being addictive, that fix that we get. Sometimes even from the stress that can in itself become a stress reliever. So it's good, as that's where I was going with this. It's good to see that mental health is being destigmatized, but at the same time, because of social media and that fix we get from extremes, it seems that sometimes things are also romanticized. So where a person acting crazy may actually need professional help, because, and when I say acting crazy, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean literally acting untypical, acting in an unhealthy, irrational, possibly harmful way. Those videos are going viral. People are judging. Oh my goodness, what a Karen, right? We're criticizing. People are getting that fix from the videos they're choosing to watch. It goes viral. Whoever posted it makes the money, which is going to want to make them more. It's going to make them want to make more, right? That's that reward cycle. And now you have mental illness not being addressed. It's romanticized. Or you have topics where people want to say in the name of acceptance that it's just, be whatever you want to be, live your life. But there's actually hurting people here behind the scenes that need help because they are distressed or they're unhappy with themselves or they are, all kinds of different scenarios. And so I'm seeing a positive in how mental health is developing, but also a concern with how sometimes it's being romanticized, where there is a need for help being dismissed in the name of what? Acceptance, tolerance, inclusion, unity. It's a fine line, it's a dance. Addicted to trauma, the pain of pleasure and the pleasure of pain. And let me know so far what you're thinking about all this. Wherever you're watching or listening from, leave a comment or join us on social media on these platforms and share what your thoughts are so we can further discuss. One of the things that struck my colleague Mark Greenberg and me when we ran therapy groups for Vietnam combat veterans was how, despite their feelings of horror and grief, many of them seemed to come to life when they talked about their helicopter crashes and their dying comrades. Many traumatized people seem to seek out experiences that would repel most of us, and patients often complain about a vague sense of emptiness and boredom when they're not angry, under duress, or involved in some dangerous activity. Now, keep that in mind when we're looking at social media, for example. Keep that in mind for yourself and the way you interact with people. We see people getting angry, almost looking for a fight. And because we don't know who's behind the screen, we may think this is just some type of troll. We may think this is just a person looking for attention. That very well may be the case. But could it be that this is a person that has experienced trauma? Could it be that this is a person that has experienced some type of abuse, some type of distress that now they feel bored or empty when they're not experiencing those high levels of stress, when their brain is not releasing those high chemicals because that's what they're used to. And so they're creating an environment of toxicity because that's all they know. Freud had a term for such traumatic reenactment. Quote, the compulsion to repeat. He and many of his followers believed that reenactments were a conscious attempt to get control over a painful situation, and that they eventually could lead to mastery and resolution. There is no evidence for that theory. Repetition leads only to further pain and self-hatred. Isn't that interesting, the different schools of thought, the different minds that have come along that have had different theories? So here it would be this idea that you reenact something and as an unconscious attempt to get control over that situation. So for example, I recreate a toxic environment so I can control it this time. I reenact what I've been through before so I can this time overcome. And I think I can see validity in the sense that we try that. I can see validity in the sense that we look for those situations because we hope this is our opportunity to redo, to now win, to now gain control. This could be in regards to romantic relationships, right? We find someone who's similar to that person that broke our heart and we're attracted, maybe even subconsciously. We might not even realize it consciously. Hope that this person likes us back, that this time it's not unrequited love, and perhaps internally trying to heal what was broken before, trying to gain control over what was lost. And then ironically, because this person may be similar to this person of our past, we end up just repeating the cycle. Someone who's not interested, some player, unrequited love, you name it. This goes for any scenario. This goes for maybe if what people are used to is abuse and substance abuse, and we find ourselves in similar circles. And because we hope this time we're going to stand up to the bully. This time we're not going to enable the addict. This time we're not going to be beaten. But ironically, we end up finding ourselves in the same pattern. And so here the author, Dr. van der Kolk, says that there's no evidence for that theory. Repetition leads only to further pain and self-hatred. So it's a theory. It's something we try, but that doesn't mean that it's effective because ironically, it often just leads to further pain. Sticking around the same crowd, being around people that are harmful to you, dating a certain type of person, it just ends up leading to further pain and self-hatred. In fact, even reliving the trauma repeatedly in therapy may reinforce preoccupation and fixation. That's an interesting theory as well. What do you think of that? Repeating certain things or reliving it through therapy, do you think that helps? Or do you think that leads to further fixation? I could see, as with everything, it being a dance. I think there is a time and place to go back in the past, to look at where this came from. What did our mother and father do? What is the why and the source behind it? I think there's a time and place to relive things, but I think it's dangerous if we do it too much. The past is the past for a reason. And I think it's this fine line between allowing ourselves to understand where we've come from because it has shaped who we are. It is a sense of trying to give meaning. Sometimes that also gives us a sense of control, going back to that place. People do it through talk therapy. People do it through cognitive behavioral therapy. People may try it through hypnosis, all kinds of different strategies where we try to go back to gain control, maybe to give meaning to a situation, to an event, so that we can let it go. But I think the key word is to let it go. Just like with the stages of grief, the idea is to work through it to reach acceptance. If we're just reliving things, and they're now becoming a fixation, I think the danger could be that we're reliving it not to release it, but we're reliving it to continually get that release of chemicals that make us feel good, to get that adrenaline, the dopamine, to get that fix from being back in our mind, being back in that harmful, dangerous, hurting place. It almost becomes this drug. We're now reliving it because we're getting a fix from it. And there's also something to be said about not doing that because it causes fixation and obsession. What do you think about that? About the statement that trauma, PTSD, and those things affect our bodies, affect our DNA, and actually can have an impact on people? What are your thoughts on trauma being genetically passed down? Do you think that that's possible? And what are your thoughts on people's tendencies to revisit some of that pain and where it becomes a fixation? What are your thoughts on that? What do you know about trauma? If you'd like to share, if you would like to share what has your experience been with trauma? What has helped you work through some of the pain of the past? Even if you wouldn't go as far as to say that you have PTSD, what has your experience been with that? Even if you don't feel like you would call it trauma, but just experiences, hardships. How have you dealt with that? How have you overcome? Has that done for you as a person in this life? Comment below. I look forward to being on the next ride with you as we dive further. I'll see you on the next ride. Ayo!